Hi, y'all. Welcome back to Gen X Life Lab. Today, we're going to have some fun. At least I think it's fun. I don't know about you, but I spent years looking for the answer. The answer to what I should do with my life. I kept trying to find like in Blazing Saddles, they say, find your one thing and then stick with that. I wanted to find my one thing. The answer to what my purpose was. I'm here on earth, so obviously I'm here for a reason. So what's my purpose in that? And really the answer to what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I think a lot of us in middle life are still waiting for the answer to that question, but it hasn't come. At least that's not what happened for me. But instead, in all of my digging, I found clues. Things I loved as a child, things I daydreamed about, parts of jobs I love, parts of jobs that had me wanting to pull my hair out, climb the walls, books I couldn't stop reading, subjects I kept returning to over and over again. And eventually I realized something. Maybe self-discovery isn't about finding answers. Maybe it's about finding clues. Maybe the person you're trying to find isn't missing. Maybe they're just buried under a lot of layers of stuff. About when I was, say 25 years old, I went for a job interview. And as part of that job interview, I was given a personality test. Myers-Briggs. If you've ever taken it, you know that you're either extroverted, introverted, so on and so forth. But as soon as I got my results from that, I was fascinated. I was like, holy crap, I never even realized all these things about myself. So that started me on a journey because I wanted to find my one thing. I wanted the clouds to part and the ray of sunshine to come down to light this podium that had my one thing illuminated, the undeniable. This is why you're here and this is what you should do. That never happened. So I started taking more personality tests. You name it, I've probably taken it. I've done enneagrams, I've done human design, I've done the love languages, I've done a lot of church-related ones because I was very involved in church, the ones with the beaver and the buffalo and the butterfly and this. I've done Strengths Finder, pretty much you name it, I've probably taken some form of it. All in the hopes of finding my purpose. But they didn't help. I kept wanting it to tell me what my story should be. I kept waiting for certainty, that ray of sunshine. Hello, other people have that. Why can't I have that? And I kept putting things on hold because I was waiting for permission. I was waiting for a job title. But through the years, everything started to pile up and the layers started to be placed over those dreams and those desires. To be practical, to be responsible, to get a real job, stop dreaming, put others first. Even into my adulthood. I started writing books in October, it'll be 4 years ago. And I can remember going to visit my mom and telling her, Mom, I've written a book and I'm going to publish it. And she's like, why would you want to do that? Which was pretty much the status quo throughout most of my life, anytime I talked about any of my frivolous, fanciful things. And at first I started to be hurt. Then I'm like, nope, not going to go there. So I told her, I said, Mom, I'm grown. I make my own money. I pay my own bills. I'm doing this because it's fun. And frankly, I want to have some fun. So I'm going to do it. She's like, okay, whatever. But a lot of us, we adapted to that kind of input so successfully that we have completely lost visibility to ourselves. We don't lose ourselves overnight. We adapted ourselves away a little bit at a time, layer by layer by layer. So, Welcome to your archaeological dig. We're going to do some identity archaeology today. You know, archaeologists don't find entire civilizations. They eventually might, but that's not how it starts. It starts with little bitty fragments. They might find a little shard of pottery, or a bone, or a cup. Some discoveries might require shovels. When they're first going in and laying things out, they want to dig away around the edges, and they might take shovels to that. But when they really start getting to the good stuff, they get out, you know, have you ever seen those little fluffy brushes that they go and they do their little thing? If you've ever watched Jurassic Park, you've seen them take that to where they're clearing away the dirt and the grit to get to the good stuff, to the nuggets. And self-discovery kind of starts to work the same way. So we may dig some things out. We may start using those little brushes to clear things away as we get to the finer details. And I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm going to give you a link down in the comments or in the description that's going to give you this on paper to where if you want to take it and sit with it, you can. And it's going to go a little more in depth. But we're going to go through some questions. So our first artifact that we're going to start to unearth is childhood joy. What did you like to do when you were a kid when nobody told you what to do? You know, I remember during the summers, because my mom was a single mom and I was still fairly young, I would get on a bus and travel 100 miles to spend my summers with my grandparents. And my brothers who were older, they were old enough to stay on their own, so they did. So during the summers, I was with my grandparents, and every Sunday we would drive out to my great-grandfather's house. And they would all be sitting around talking, and I would go over in the corner where he kept some things just for me. The little Lincoln log, building blocks, loved playing with those. But my favorite thing was the coloring books. I had a coffee can full of crayons, and I had different coloring books, and some of them were really old and, you know, but I still loved them. I would color. I loved to color. I loved being artistic. Another question, what absorbed your attention? What did you focus on? I know I had a brother who was an athlete and he loved playing sports. And so he focused on that a lot. And he played sports all the time. What absorbed your attention? Maybe you were a sci-fi kid. You know, I remember when Star Wars first came out and I stood in line with some friends to go see Star Wars. Maybe you love that sort of things. Maybe you love building things with Legos. Maybe you like constructing things with those Lincoln logs that I talked about. What toys did you wear out? I remember helping my grandpa make a little Pine Derby racer car once. And that was a lot of fun. And the little boy that he helped design it for, that kid wore that car out. Maybe you liked building models. My other brother, he really enjoyed building models of cars, and especially race cars, and he had tons of them, and they were pristine and perfect, and he would spend hours doing that without moving away from his seat. Maybe you like drawing. Maybe you like coloring like me. Maybe you like painting. Maybe you liked organizing things. I had a friend that she would have everything in her room had a place and everything was in its place. And she couldn't stand it if anything was out of order. I was a little messier than that. Maybe you like storytelling like me. I had a story for everything. I loved making up stories. Maybe you liked watching over and teaching your younger siblings, figuring things out so that you could convey information to them. So that's artifact number 1, kid stuff. Artifact number 2, what are your fascinations? And fascinations are things that follow you through life. Not really passions. It's not like you have to do it, like you super care about it. But fascinations, for instance, like I said, I've taken every personality test that I've gotten my hands on. And I'm fascinated by it because I'm fascinated by the reasons why people act the way they do, the things that drive them, you know, astrology and all that kind of stuff, What does your birth date say about you? What does your sign say about you? What does your personality say about you? Are you introverted? Are you extroverted? All those kinds of things. I've always been fascinated with them. And I have several things that I've been fascinated with that I keep circling around to. Something creative and artistic is always in the mix, even if it's nothing more than taking a class to design earrings, to learn how to put together earrings, learning how to paint, learning how to draw. I'm still not a very good drawer, but I did take a class in it once. I love taking classes and things just because I'm curious about it. And learning things is a passion because it's not always just about creative stuff. Fascinations are our breadcrumbs because repeated interests matter. If you have things that you keep cycling back to that you do just for fun, not because you're passionate about it and wanting to make an impact on the world with it, but just because you enjoy it, that's a breadcrumb. That's an artifact. They reveal our motivations. These are the things that we take part in without thinking, oh, I need to go do this. It's just in us to play in those areas. For instance, maybe you're a history buff. Maybe you just like learning about old civilizations. I was talking with a guy yesterday that he was very interested in learning about Mesopotamia. Go figure. Not my kind of thing, but he loved it and could talk for hours on end. He was fascinated about it. Didn't care anything about doing anything with it. He just loved learning about it. Some people like psychology. They want to dig beyond just the personality and dig into the core of who we are. Some people like mysteries. I can remember I had a friend that we would do our Friday night mysteries and dinner, where I would go to her house and she and I and her kids would make dinner, and then we'd sit down and we'd watch Murder, She Wrote. And we'd always try to figure out who done it. Maybe you're interested in human behavior. Maybe you're fascinated with business. That's a big one for me. I love finding interesting ways to make money. Maybe it's all about creativity for you, doing something as a creative outlet, whether it's scrapbooking or painting or building something, being creative, making something out of nothing. Maybe it's spirituality. Maybe you enjoy serving through your church. Maybe you enjoy engaging in long walks in the wilderness because that helps you feel connected to your spirituality. Maybe you like participating in drum circles. Maybe you're interested in, witchcraft or crystals or tarot or stuff like that. Anything that connects you with your spiritual beliefs. Maybe you like to travel just for the fun of it. Doesn't have to have a purpose. And you like going to especially places where you can dig into the hidden gems that only the locals know about it. Maybe you have a talent for that. And that fascinates you, going to different places and learning about different cultures. Artifact number 3, our daydreams. When you get a little time alone and you're not focused on anything and you can just let your mind wander, where does it go? Where does it meander to? Are you always thinking about this Caribbean beach? Or are you thinking about, I think I'd like to adopt an animal, start an animal shelter, volunteer at an animal shelter. What do you daydream about? I think I'd like to just run away and go live on a boat and sail the 7 seas. I think I'd like to scale Mount Everest. Who knows? What do you daydream about? There's no right or wrong answers. That's the fun of this. It's just putting information out, digging up those nuggets and writing them down, because a lot of times you'll start to uncover that you forgot about all these things that you're fascinated about, passionate about, that you daydream about. And when you're thinking about your daydreams, don't rein your mind in to think about what you should put down. Just pay attention to where it goes, where your mind wanders off to. What does it do? Artifact number 4. And this is a big one because this is a big part of our lives. The job clues. What are your favorite parts of your job? The things you love doing. Not necessarily the things you do well. Because, for instance, when it comes to accounting type work, where you're keeping track of expenses, putting everything into a database, tracking it and making sure that reporting on it, yada, yada. I am very good at that kind of thing. But I hate it. It is not my favorite thing to do. And if it's a teeny tiny part of my job, I can totally do it. But if it were my whole job, I wouldn't last very long. So focus on the parts that you truly, truly enjoy. Not just the things you're good at. Because honestly, skills are the smallest part of the equation when we're trying to uncover the things we love, the things we enjoy doing. Skills are learned. And even if you're an old fart like me and 60 years old, you can learn new things. So, focus on the things you love doing. The title of the job doesn't matter. The experience is what matters. For instance, two people can have the same exact job and they both feel differently about it because they have different aspects of that job that energize them, and that same aspect that energizes one may drain the other. So, the good parts, the things you enjoy. And I know this whole entire process can be frustrating because, like me, you want the ray of sunshine to shine down and say, this is your one thing. That's probably not going to happen if it hasn't happened yet. There's a chance. It could be that you're a secret diver who just didn't find out where they wanted to dive into. And that's what an author calls the people who typically have one thing that they just really love doing, and they tend to do that. But most people know that pretty early on and tend to follow careers into that. But a whole lot of people are like me and like way too many things to ever settle down with just one. So you might not get the answer that you should be a teacher, or you should be a writer, or you should be a coach, or a designer. But you may find out that you have a very curious mind, that you love helping people, that you like creating things, that you like keeping things organized, that you love exploring things, even if it's just exploring for information or exploring the woods or exploring new cities. We're not looking for a destination here. We're trying to find a compass to start pointing us in the right direction. So don't look at this as, I want to find out what I should become. Instead, we're looking for things that you can try. We're not looking for certainty. We're looking for evidence. Because identity at this stage is going to be remembered more than invented. We've already invented an identity that was born out of expectations and adaptation and trying to survive in life. We're looking to remember who we were before that and who we are down deep that we've been afraid to talk about for a long time. We're not creating a new self. We're uncovering the one that's already there, rediscovering what's at your core. And one of the reasons why I wanted to call this Gen X Life Lab is because we're going to experiment. Because as we start digging into this, you may discover that all of these fears start to creep up. And we talked a little bit about that in a video. The fear of failure, the fear of success, the fear of change. But we're just experimenting. We're just playing. And that's something that I've gotten very good at as I've gotten older. For instance, do you remember the days when it seemed like somebody produced a cupcake and suddenly there were cupcake stores popping up on every corner? Well, I missed the cupcake wave, but then I started thinking about popcorn. What would happen if I made popcorn? Because again, like I said, one of my strengths in StrengthsFinder stuff is maximizer. I'm not great at inventing new things, but I'm excellent at taking things that aren't working real great and making them work really well. So I take things, make them better. So on popcorn, it seemed like there were a lot of people starting to dabble in popcorn, but they were all using the exact same things from the exact same company, and it was full of chemicals and a whole bunch of junk. Yeah, if you ever go to a popcorn store, flip it over and look at what's actually in it. You may not want to have it. So I decided I was going to make it better. Did all air pop popcorn. I did all organic ingredients. Instead of high fructose corn syrup, I used agave nectar, and on and on and on. And it did really well. But then I got to the point where I was either going to have to hire someone to continue doing it or let it go because of the time constraints. And I thought about it long and hard, and I decided that I would let it go because I enjoyed it and it was fun, and I did it for a couple of years, and I had a great time doing it. But I discovered that the part I liked best, because my major outlet for selling was farmers markets. And I discovered the part I liked the best about it was talking with people and meeting them and giving them samples and talking to them about my popcorn and that kind of thing. That the actual making the popcorn was not a joy to me. It wasn't fun. And then when I started thinking about, I'm going to hire some people and I just don't know. And that's the feeling I got. So the experiment was over. So I made the notes that popcorn's not a good option for you. It's fun for the short term, but it's not a long-term thing that you're going to want to do. And I closed that lab notebook. And there have been a few things that I've tried like that because it was just an experiment. And it wasn't a matter of, you should be ashamed because you didn't commit. You could have made it go real big. But if I didn't love it, what was the point? It was fun until it wasn't. And that's okay. So along with the questions that we've already talked about, I'm going to ask you some questions that you can ask yourself to start the excavation. And like I mentioned before, I'm going to link a worksheet down in the description. And it's one that I used to use in a class that I used to teach called Discovering Your Ideal Word. And in that class, it used to crack me up because I would give in the description of the class, this is not about finding a job title. This is about finding the things you love to do. Gave them the whole speech about the ray of sunshine and told them that's not going to happen. This is not to give you a job title. This is help you discover the things you enjoy, your ideal work, not your perfect job. But still, at the end of every class, there was always somebody who was majorly disappointed and frustrated because they didn't get their job title that they should go hunting for jobs for. But this is a worksheet that I used to use in that class, and it's going to help you dig in. And if you start feeling things stir up, set it aside. Come back to it. Because chances are, anytime we start talking about change, or you start thinking about change or doing something different, those feelings will start to stir up. And just tell that little part of your lizard brain, this is just an excavation. We're not changing anything yet. This is just an excavation. And maybe we'll do an experiment or two to see what seems fun. You know, if it's something that you loved when you were a kid, you may not love it anymore, and that's okay. So, some questions for you to ponder upon. What is something that you loved as a child that you haven't thought about in years? What fascination followed you through multiple decades of your life? What part of yourself do you think got buried under responsibility? If you could run one tiny experiment, just one tiny experiment this month, what would it be? What class would you take? What trip would you take? What restaurant would you go try? Just because you wanted to experiment with cuisine that you'd never been able to do before. If this video resonated with you, don't rush off and reinvent your life tonight, because chances are that's going to end disastrously, because this isn't about a quick fix. This is about excavation and uncovering who you are. Just start paying attention. Notice what keeps showing up in you when you think about these questions. Notice the things that you light up about when you talk about them. Notice the subjects you keep returning to. What's something that you could sit and talk about with somebody for 30 minutes without stopping, just because you love that topic? Maybe it's gardening. Maybe it's canning. Maybe it's automobile repair. Maybe it's building something. Maybe it's the way to find the best clothes for you to wear. Think about those things. Notice the dreams that never quite went away. Those aren't distractions. They're clues. They're artifacts. And if you want, tell me in the comments what artifact you uncovered during your dig today, because I'd really, really love to hear about it. And if you're enjoying these types of conversations, I encourage you to like and subscribe, and we'll work our way through the lab together.